I'm Ashley Hawkins, and I'm the manga librarian, and today we are talking about anime conventions. So, anime conventions are a big part of anime and manga culture, and actually they get mentioned quite a bit in manga. And it's also just something that you might want to know a little bit more about. And so I am going to talk to you a little bit about what are anime conventions, what's the history of anime conventions, and what to expect when you maybe bring students to an anime convention, or what you might want to do at an anime convention as a librarian. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so anime conventions. They've been around for quite a while at this point. The first anime convention is Comiket, which is a huge, magnificent comic convention or manga convention that happens in Tokyo at Tokyo Big Sight in Odaiba. It is mostly based on fan-published manga called doujinshi. And the original one only had about 700 people in attendance. But in recent years, Comiket has attracted over 500,000 people. It is an enormous, huge event. It's just simply massive. And it's really important to understand the importance of this event to the anime and manga community at large. It's really exciting because it's a place where, first off, people are expressing their own creativity and their own sort of desires for what they want to see stories be. It's a destination for some of the most spectacular cosplay. And nowadays it's heavily sponsored by studios and publishing companies, and other comic conventions or manga conventions in Japan are sponsored at a similar rate. There are conventions in Japan are a big business, and they're pretty widely done. And the same can kind of be said in the United States at this point. Anime conventions started showing up in the United States around the 1980s, so not too much later than Comiket. And there's some argument over which one is the first one, either Project Akon or Yamato-kan. And it's hard to kind of suss out what's accurate. Yamato-kan is supposedly the first, having been held in 1983. Project Akon was held in 1990. But there's disputes and arguments. This is why excellent records should be kept about things. But from that point forward, multiple conventions spawned in various parts of the United States. Anime conventions exploded in popularity over the past 20 or so years. AnimeCon, which was held in San Jose, California, is notable for being the first convention to break the 1,000 attendance mark. It was also the first convention to receive support from American and Japanese production studios. Anime Expo, which has been held in California since 1992, is considered the largest anime convention in North America and has attracted really large numbers. But the data that I've been able to find is slightly older, so it's hard to say right now. And in a post-COVID world, it's kind of hard to say who's the biggest. I think we'll have to kind of see next year what happens. to kind of judge who's the biggest, like who's getting the highest attendance, etc. and so forth. There are also anime conventions worldwide. The largest convention in Europe is Japan Expo in Paris, and it is actually the largest in the world outside of Japan. France has a very rich anime and manga culture, and so that's not very surprising. So some core components of anime conventions are the attendance of guests. There's usually a guest list as part of the lineup. It's usually industry figures. More and more we're seeing creators from Japan. This is a little bit difficult now because of travel restrictions from Japan, but for the most part, there are attempts to bring over original creators or have contact with original creators. And virtual events have really tapped into having, original creators in Japan zooming in to virtual events. But like I said, with travel restrictions, it's a little bit harder. Once upon a time, it was mostly voice actors from the American industry or various industry professionals who were stateside. But now it's kind of a mix. At Anime NYC this past weekend, which is the convention that I have attended the most recently, there were quite a few voice actors, but that's fairly normal. And then other industry professionals. So guests are frequently a big part of it. There are also panels. In the past, when I first started attending, panels were usually done by amateurs, not really done by professionals. Like they weren't really done by publishing houses or production companies. It was mostly somebody who had an idea for a panel and just went up and did it. I have friends who have done panels for several years in a row that are very popular, and it's just a big part of what they do. There's also like various other things that can happen at anime conventions. There's cosplay contests, there's anime music video contests. There are sometimes performances that can range towards like the burlesque. There can be lip sync contests while dressed up as your favorite characters. It can actually get kind of wacky and fun. There can be staged performances of things. Just some very it's very creative of what people can really come up with. There's also obviously the exhibit hall or dealer's room, and that's usually where you can buy stuff. In the early days, it was usually like small mom and pop shops that were importing things from Japan. Nowadays, it's actually a blend of those type of shops as well as actual production companies and publishers, booksellers, and it's an interesting blend nowadays. And then there's almost always an artist alley, where there are people who have prints of their work as well as oftentimes clothing that features their artwork, fanzines, various types of crafts, things like needle felting or crochet, buttons, stickers, various things that you can buy that feature the artwork of that person. So these are all sort of things that happen at conventions. In some ways, it's similar to professional conventions that you may have attended, but in other ways, it's very different. The vibe is very different. The intent is very different, and just the clientele is going to be very different. But that being said, bringing students to these conventions can actually be a really fulfilling thing to do. So I recently brought my students to Anime NYC. I brought a small group of students because of various reasons. I could only bring so many. Just, the world. But Peter Tatara, who is the person who runs Left Field Media, which runs Anime NYC, so he is the founder of Anime NYC, he graciously gave my students tickets to attend Anime NYC, and they had so much fun. And it was really great to be able to take students on that sort of experience, and let them have that. And it was also just really fulfilling. So I brought students. They had their passes, and what I did was, since there was adult presence with them as well. There was an older sibling. I had them all give me their numbers, and because my students are teenagers, they're young adults, and also one of the students is actually technically an adult. I had them give me their numbers, and I told them, go, do what you want, you just can't leave the convention center. Check in with me every hour. Let me know what you're doing, what panel room you're in. I'm going to go do librarian business, because that's what I was going to go do, was librarian business. If you really want to hang out with me, then let me know and we'll hang out. But really, they wanted to go do their own thing. And what they did was they actually hung out in the special events room, and they just kind of watched panels and participated in things and got really hyped up and had a lot of fun, while I went around and talked to publishers, purchased books for the library, and just sort of did, like I said, librarian things. So the great thing about an anime convention, if you're going with teenagers who are fairly self-sufficient, is they can be self-sufficient. You can just sort of set them loose and they will go do their own thing, and you just make sure to check in with them. Security is very secure at these things, and particularly nowadays, it is not the Wild West that it was when I was younger. And there's just, there are all these structured sort of things that are happening, like the panels, where you just know that they're going to be sitting in one spot and they're going to be fine, and I'm not too worried. And they were really good about checking in, really good about communicating with me, and they've been talking about it nonstop. They loved every moment of it, and I can't wait to do it again. I think it'll be even better next year, and I want to bring more kids. I want to do so much more, but this was definitely so much fun to just give students this experience of being kind of out in the world and communicating with other anime nerds. And that was really great. For myself as a professional, some other things that I could do, like I said, networked with publishers. It's not like ALA or AASL. They don't really have galleys or things like that on hand. They're there to kind of make a profit because these are their number one, consumers. But they did have books that were early. So Yen Press had books that were not published yet. They wouldn't be published until November 30th, which is 2 days from when I am recording this. And that was pretty cool to be able to get some books a little bit early. Usually there's a discount as well off of the cover price. And you can also kind of see things that are newer. Also things that maybe are harder to get right now that aren't necessarily in stock, they may have for the convention. So I was able to snag some things that I have not been able to find elsewhere. So that was really great. The other thing that I did was I did a panel, and I did this panel with some of my colleagues. So with Jillian Rudez, who is another New York City school librarian who runs the Manga in Libraries webinars, Joe Pasculo and Renee Scott, who are NYPL librarians, and Victoria Raybar, who is a research librarian. We put together a panel called Teen Talk Through Manga. Unfortunately, Victoria couldn't join us for the actual panel, but she put together all of the information, and she had previously presented most of it at at New York Comic Con. So you can actually see the earlier version of the panel that didn't have me on it if you go to the New York Comic Con thing. She compiled a lot of the information, so she needs a lot of credit for that. And Renee and Joe brought so much compassion and so much of their knowledge as public librarians to the panel, and it was just a really great experience. It was my first in-person panel since the pandemic, and it was really nice. And it just was very professional. I feel like we were able to connect young people with titles they really needed. And Joe and Renee really made some wonderful connections with young people in our audience that were really moving. And I am very happy that we were able to reach some of these young people. Who, need the presence of a good librarian in their life. And it just kind of validated a lot of the work that is being done in this area and why manga is so important to young people and why manga is necessary. So that was a really wonderful experience. I also attended some industry panels. I didn't attend as many as I wanted to. I have mentioned before that I am disabled, so when I go to these things, I am in a wheelchair. And so my limited mobility makes things kind of difficult in terms of navigation. The first day, we had this chair. And this is not on Anime NYC, this is on the Javits Center. We had this chair that was really janky and did not work well. And it was just a little bit too short. So my husband was having a hard time pushing it. And in self-pushing it, it was not the best. I'm generally pretty good at handling wheelchairs, and it didn't maneuver very well. So trying to get to panels from point A to point B was a little bit difficult, but like I said, that is on the Javits and on needing to replace some of these wheelchairs. But the wheelchair was provided, and so I can't complain too much, I guess. I also, just in general, people are not terribly accommodating to wheelchairs, and that's just humans. They just kind of ignore your existence when you're in a wheelchair, so, you know, just constantly getting bumped into. So like trying to get to panels was a little bit difficult, and also there were like things that I wanted to have these conversations with publishers. I wanted to look at the artist's alley, and navigating up and down the aisles takes like so much more time. And so, you know, we're like halfway through an aisle, and then I realized like, oh, there was a panel that I wanted to see, but you've got to get there earlier when you're in the chair, and it's like, it's a whole thing. So I missed some panels that I wanted to see, and I don't know. I'll navigate that better next year, I guess. We'll see. Maybe next year I'll just have my own chair. We'll see where I'm at next year. But these are kind of things that are particular to me, struggles. I think if I were still more mobile, I would have been able to make the various things I wanted to make. But I did manage to get to the Kodansha industry panel. I managed to see some other things. And like I said, I was able to have some conversations that were actually really fruitful, and just, I think, were really helpful. And hopefully they'll kind of be helpful to you in the future, as I'm kind of gathering more and more information. But yeah, these are sort of the things you can do. You can attend these panels, you can navigate, you can purchase, and like I said, publishers love us. They love talking to us, librarians, and, you know, especially when we express enthusiasm for the things that they're putting out. And you'll see publishers that you wouldn't see at ALA or AASL when it comes to manga. They're publishers that are maybe just now sort of starting out, and haven't really moved into that phase of like being at ALA and AASL. So it's a good practice. But yeah, like I said, I had a really good experience at Anime NYC. Things have definitely changed a lot in terms of convention going, not just since the pandemic, but since I started going to conventions. And part of it's, you know, myself. There are things that I used to do that I don't do, and then there are things that are just, the culture has shifted. These events have transformed from being small, little, insular events to being really major conventions, incomparable to size to Comic Cons and other such things. So yeah, if you're considering bringing students to an anime convention, I highly recommend it. I do know the logistics are a bit tricky. It was tricky with logistics to figure out how exactly to make that work. And so maybe it's something you can consider for next school year. Also, a lot of the anime conventions right now are happening now, literally within the next couple weeks. So you may not have time to plan them out. So maybe next year. But yeah, that's a little bit about conventions, a little bit about why you should attend them, and I hope it was helpful. Okay. and I will see you in the next video.